Speaking of giving back, I have a very special guest today, a very good friend of mine. Notice everyone on the bill today is a good friend of mine. It's a good friend today. Is Mark Montgomery, guitarist, entrepreneur, investor, teacher, philanthropist,
father,
husband, if I left anything else, gardener, cliff jumper, yes, cliff jumper. Mark is, there's a bunch of reasons I wanted Mark to be here today. The first of which is, Mark is actually, those of you know my story, I co-founded a company called Archgrowth a few years back, and when you're trying to get an early stage company off the ground, having that first person to say, yeah, I'll write a check, is really, really important to the success, and it makes all the other dominoes kind of fall easier. And Mark was actually the first person that told Matt, Hermie, and myself that, yeah, you know what? I'll get behind you guys. How about you guys? He said, I'm not even so sure about the idea, but I believe in you guys. And so, obviously, from there, he was an investor, a mentor, and in the last year or two ago, we've become pretty good friends. So, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Our fire is going.
Oh no, our fire's
Can we get some help? Alright, there you go. That's why we brought this small fire.
Is that an old one?
That's right. Keeping it warm. We're keeping it warm. So, Mark, you sold your first company. You started your first company when?
Oh, well, way back. If you want to,
Yeah.
I started.
I know who you are most of the.
Okay, well, so I think where you come from is a lot of it. It tells a lot about where you're going to go. I grew up in a house with a fine art painter and a serial entrepreneur. So I have this weird, mildly psychotic, right and left brain happening simultaneously, which allows me to, sit in a room with Kanye West and have a conversation, and also sit in a room with the CEO and have the same quality conversation. I actually have my grandmother has been sort of doling out all of the archives, and she sent me the flyer for my first business, which was a lawn care service that had a money back guarantee, and I drew it was the cheesiest thing ever typed on a typewriter literally made me feel incredibly old. So I've just had a kind of a bent for this my whole life, but the other side of that story is I got bit hard by music early. And so by the time I got to Nashville in '90, I had done every job in the music business to work at a record company, including touring. I'm a unabashed hair metal guy. If you want some hair metal facts after the presentation, I'll be happy to tell you who played guitar on the Warrant record. That level of detail. And so I had a few little things, with nothing of note, just an entrepreneurial spirit. When I got to Nashville, I moved to Nashville in 1990 with $800. A crazy ex-girlfriend who I found out later was wanted in 2 states, which is why she didn't drive. I didn't really sort of connect the dots. After we had moved, and my drummer, and we moved to Tennessee with all of our gear, 2 pounds of weed stuffed in a kick drum, and a crazy chick who was wanted in 2 states. And that's kind of how it all started. That's funny.
And now you're here.
Here I am.
That's weird.
So I really, it's been said that my skill is finding an 800-pound gorilla and throwing rocks at it. I like war. I like to go to war with incumbents. It's my favorite thing to do in the world. And I actually like change, even if I'm an old guy. I'm 46. So by the time you're 46, most old guys kind of are set. I'm sort of constantly looking for a way to break something and a better way to do something.
Well, that's, when I met you, your kind of MO reputation in Nashville is, well, first, which is, I was going to say agitator.
Isn't that right, boss? Isn't that right?
Is, the music and technology guy. So you were really on the forefront of putting music on the web, right?
Yeah, I started started selling music directly to consumers in 1996. And I didn't know, I mean, to me it just seemed like a completely logical thing to do, but apparently that was innovative, and we were one of the first 5 companies in the US to do it. And at that point in time, I remember, having the idea, and I'm a recovering coder, and built that first system with a couple other guys, and we had to build the entire supply chain. So from sort of the web front end all the way through delivery, because at some point when people order shit, they would like to get it in the mail. And so it was a combination of, secure FTP, front end web, secure FTP, transfer it into a FileMaker database, which then we built an entire sort of a back end that allowed us to hit print, and all the orders would print out, and we go back in the back and pick, pack, and ship all that stuff. And we started with one act, and that eventually grew into a new concept, which was Echo, which was the company that we sold accidentally in 2007. And
Accidentally.
well, it was not really built to sell. It was built to fundamentally disrupt an industry. So we were on a mission. We were not really for sale. But I made a couple of what I would consider to be fatal errors. First of which was I was willing to be right at any cost. And that was a huge mistake, because when you're developing software platforms 18 months in advance of revenue realization, at some point you run out of money. And then that forces you to do shit you don't want to do. Take investors, take out bank loans, mortgage your house, I can give you a whole litany of those things. This idea of 96 was sort of you remember that? Have you ever seen that commercial, the UPS commercial, where they're launching an e-commerce website and everybody's sitting around the computer,
Yeah.
and they're watching the orders come in, and all of a sudden it's like,
We got one.
yeah, and then it's like, we got 100,000, right? I had that moment, and that happened at midnight. I mean, we rolled this thing out, and we had people waiting to purchase, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is what I want to do. And then that turned into discovering Napster 3.5 years later, and going, oh, okay, well now this is a total game changer. There was a gigantic difference between a leveling of the playing field and a fundamental destruction of the previous playing field, which is what Napster represented, right? And so for me, it's always been about sort of pursuing this idea of as the playing field is leveled, there's the good news is the playing field is level. The bad news is the playing field is level. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry can make a record, which is not necessarily a good thing, because some of those folks really shouldn't be making records because they suck. Not what we just heard today. That was actually real. That's what real art looks like, I think, as opposed to we can Google a bunch of YouTube videos, very quickly determine.
So how long, when Echo started, so Echo's the company you sold in 2007, when did it kick off? Talk about just kind of that time frame from, did you have revenue first or investors first?
Revenue first, yeah.
Okay.
So the previous, in 96 when the light came on, it was like, oh my God, this is where we need to go. We need to run in this direction. At the time, I was a partner in a recording studio that had about $1.5 million worth of gear in it, about 8,000 square feet. Used to be Tom T. Hall's old room. We were doing what I would call the artist services model before anybody called it artist services. So you could walk in the front door with a song and walk out the back door with a distribution deal, all your creative, your web, everything, soup to nuts. And we did that for independent acts, and we did it for big acts. And about end of 98, Pro Tools, which was a little application that used to be called Sound Designer, started to creep into the recorded music model. And I went to my partners, who at that time were talking about investing another $1 million in a 5.1 mix room, because what they thought was that consumers wanted better quality audio. And I was like, no, that's wrong. Consumers want portability and convenience. And quite frankly, most consumers can't hear pitch, much less the fidelity of audio. Mm-hmm. So that is an absolute wrong turn, and I don't want anything to do with it. So we argued about it for a year, And I left and we started Echo. The deal that we negotiated is I own the real estate, or I have ownership interest in the real estate under here. And I traded my interests for the web business, the e-commerce business, the branding and marketing business, and the physical distribution business. And 85% of our revenue came from physical distribution. Okay? So when I discovered Napster, we needed to change course immediately. So basically, we did, in our strategic planning, we determined that our goal was to get out of the business that was providing us a majority of our money. So we started with a small loan from a bank to sort of get our business up and running, but we already had customers. And we didn't take any money until 2006. So I didn't have investors for the first 7 years. You know this, I'm a control freak. I want to do it my way. As soon as you take money from somebody, it becomes not your game. And that's a good thing if the money's smart. Unfortunately, a lot of money is just plain stupid. And it's stupid in two ways. It can be stupid because it's actually stupid, or it can be,
It's cold.
Oh, thank God. Here, hold on. Wait, this is still going. Okay.
This one more.
It's good, yeah. So, that's a hard deal to sell to your partners when you go, hey, we need to kill 80, the business is generating 85% of our revenue, we need to shoot that in the head and get out of it. So that transition there was a point in time where it became obvious it was time to move. And that was when I found what would be the technical co-founder of this platform we built called Echo Tools. And what Echo Tools was, and this is going to date me, and this is in the good old days when social media was a message board. But you had 5 or 6 or 7 interaction points with consumers across digital properties. And you had no real way to take all that interaction and to put it into a distinct customer profile and action on it in real time. And so we looked around for a while, and all of a sudden we found there wasn't one, and we decided we're going to build it, because entrepreneurs are foolish in a good way and don't know what they don't know, and so they just go try shit, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did. And so I met a guy who actually was a former bass player, still a bass player, and he was working for a company called Smart DM, which was sold to Axiom in 1999 for $20 million, which was essentially a direct email platform. And I was convinced if I could get this thing, these plans out of my head into code, that we were going to be rich. And so I moved him away from his previous company, which he hated because it had become corporatized. Typically, when companies buy companies they fall in love with, then they proceed to ruin them. Unfortunately, it's the story more often than not. Talk to most companies that acquire, that usually doesn't end well. Once in a while, it ends well, but not usually. And I wooed him out for a third of his salary, and I cut him in on the deal, and I said, I'm going to make you a millionaire if you help me build this. And 5 years later, that's exactly what happened.
So that's a long window. I know when I came to you with my first business plan, and we're going to do this, and year one revenue is going to be $20 million. Year one
revenue is going to be wrong.
And I heard someone else say I want to say it's the guy who sold Hotmail, that it was a 7-year window, and that was kind of a reality check for me as an entrepreneur, that you've got these dreams, and you do got to fuel it with work, but it almost always takes longer.
Yeah, it takes twice as long and it costs twice as much. Simple as that. Always.
Well, talk to us just briefly about the acquisition process, and then what I want to move to is, we don't have, the Southeast in general has, is a decimal point in the investment dollars, compared to other places in the country. Something that Jim talks about all the time. Visit Jim, California invested $16 billion last year, and Tennessee did $149 million in investing.
I'm not going to be Debbie Downer tonight.
California, you're going to leave that to us?
Right. Okay, and so, but I'm bringing to the point that if you just look at the state of Tennessee and investment dollars that are going into companies, Nashville probably invests a lot more than our local market. So this is why, a lot of this is why we are here, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are searching for, needing, or at least think they need seed capital. So I want to move into that.
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about the acquisition. You know, watch out for there.
Well,
Whatever you want to
fatal
tell
error
me.
number 2. So I'll just give you a quick backstory on how that all kind of came to be. Like I said earlier, you know, I think one of the things you have to be able to do is to learn from your mistakes. And this idea that I was willing to be right at any cost turned out to be, although it was a profitable mistake, it was also fatal for 10 years of my life, which was difficult for me to overcome. It took me a couple of years to get over it. When you have 100 employees and hundreds of customers and 10 years of your time and energy tied up in something that somebody systematically dismantles it right in front of you, it's very emotionally difficult to watch. Particularly for somebody who plays the game like I play it. I invest my emotional self in things I work on. It's just my nature. So when we took one round of investment capital, and that story is a long one and actually is probably the best piece of the whole puzzle, which I will not tell you today. But when we took that deal, so we had a lot of interest. We had a lot of venture guys sniffing around and wanting to do deals. Interestingly, no one from the state of Tennessee, because most of the investors in this state, particularly concentrated in Nashville, only invest in what they know, and all they know is healthcare. And so they looked at our deal and they thought it was really cool, but they just had no freaking idea what we were doing, right? And as a wise man once said to me, you don't belong reporting to somebody who doesn't understand what you do, right? And so in that particular case, when you take money, you're reporting to the money. And so we had some term sheets, but I wasn't really that interested. And then we had people coming in from a variety of places externally. And the deal we ended up taking was with an angel investor using a vehicle called Acorn Ventures. And this guy's investing premise was incredibly simple, and it's the one I use. You're always betting on the guy or girl. Always bet on the jockey, never bet on the horse. Which is why I invested in you and Matt in your last deal, and why I'm investing in your new deal. It's not about the idea. The idea is going to be wrong. You just don't want it to be really wrong, right? And you assume if you're investing in a smart guy that the idea won't be really wrong. You're going to be off somewhere, but you aren't going to be dramatically off. When we took his money, my lawyer and my CFO basically said, when they made the initial proposal, they said, this will never happen. They're baiting you. This is not, you're not going to get the terms they're telling you they're going to get. And we got exactly those terms. And his premise was, I want to help you make your dream come true, which is, you just don't run into this kind of money. He's based in Seattle. He's an investor. This is how random he is. He owns the company that owns the patents in OnStar, and he owns the company that owns the patents in Coinstar. And his simple investing premise is people. Right? So the guy or the girl. And so when you're playing the game of investing, or when you're playing the game of raising capital, it's always this game. You've got a value on your side, they got a value on their side. You play this card game, and somebody's got to tip their hand. And that's where the negotiation is really done. And we did this on a Sunday afternoon.
Is that like playing poker, kind of?
It's exactly like playing poker.
High stakes.
High stakes poker. And we were sitting in our conference room on Sunday afternoon, and our investor said, we got to the point where it was time to tip the cards, and we were within $100,000 of each other in value, which is unheard of. And our CFO goes, put him on hold for a minute. He turned to me and said, you don't deserve this deal. He said, you're agreeing on value. They don't want a board seat. They're literally going to stay out of your company. Don't report to somebody who doesn't understand what you do. And he said, you got 3 things to do. So we got up, obviously, we took him on hold and said, we'll take the deal. And 2 days later, I had $1 million in my bank account. And up to that point, I had been all my partners and I, all 5 of us had mortgaged our houses because we were financing our deal with bank debt. Because we had the ramp had gotten so steep that we could not pay for what we were doing out of cash, and we had effectively taken the single biggest revenue driver out of the company and sold it because we knew it was going to go away. So we wanted to sell it at a point where it still had some value. Although it didn't give us a lot, that was the physical distribution. At our peak, we manufactured and distributed 20 million CDs a year, including software and
So did you keep, it seems like most people, that would have been a good jumping off point.
Yeah,
So did you fold because you were so far in, there was no turning back and you're stubborn, or you just believe that much? Or what?
Yes and yes, and we were really on a mission. I was really convinced and the thing is we were on a mission, and it was a valid mission. I just didn't really understand how the business actually worked at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I got to figure that out after we sold. So we raised that money. He was like, he knew what was wrong, and he knew what was right. And he told me, he said, I've been investing in technology for 10 years. I've never seen anything like this, right? He was completely enamored with what we had done. And he said, you've got 3 jobs with this money. 1, you're going to grow your market share as fast as you can. 2, you're going to build your client base as fast as you can. And 3, you're going to spend every dime I gave you because you're going to run out of money. You're going to need more money in 10 months. And then we're going to go raise you more money. And this is prior to the crash. So I'm going to fast forward. So 10 months later, we needed more money. But between the time that he gave us the money and the time that we took the next round, we had done everything he asked us to do. So we went from working with the clients we were working with to working with Kanye West and Pearl Jam and Beyonce. And I mean, we represented every big entertainer, and then we were pushing into sports. We had, who's the basketball player everybody hates?
LeBron James?
No, LeBron. So we had sort of jumped the shark over into sports. We were talking about the NFL, the NHL. We had built this enterprise platform that people were like dumbfounded by what we had built. And they're all like, you built that in Tennessee? I'm like, yeah, with 12 guys. You know, I mean, this is not and at our peak, we were serving out about 4 terabytes of data in and out of the platform. We had about 20 million unique visitors across our platform every month. And we managed just south of 30 million direct consumer relationships. And I could go into those databases and I could say, show me all the females that are 21 that have a better than 50% response rate to email that live in this zip code. Now pull them out and talk to their email client or to their phone. And oh, by the way, females between 26 and 34 tend to respond better to email from 8:30 to 11 p.m., so deliver that segment at that time. Our email open rates were 70%. And our click-through rates were 40 plus. And because we controlled the entire supply chain, including the commerce, I could go back to my client and say, we sent this email at this time on your behalf, and this is how much money it generated.
So preaching
we're not
here.
talking about an acquisition, but anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is actually better. Because we preach, you know, like most accelerators, incubators, kind of like us, do lean startup, product development, customer development. Get the product right, the people will come. Get the product right, the people will come.
Yep.
But that's a lot of growth in 10 months. How important was sales, or how do you handle the balance between product dev and actual physical sales?
Well, so you don't. I mean, the answer is if when the shit takes off, you're just hanging on. We are from the beginning of 2006 until the sale, our revenue, customers, and staff grew double every 2 months, or every 3 months, every quarter. And I mean, then we opened an office in London, and then we had an office in New York, and then we had an office in Atlanta, and then we had an office in LA, and I was like, Jesus Christ, you know, I'll take a nap later, but boy, I'd like a nap. And so back to the story. So after we took his money, 10 months later, we needed more money. And this is in the good old days when you could still raise huge amounts of capital in New York, easily. And very much dressed like this, which is part of my MO. I went to New York City and interviewed 5 investment bankers that he recommended. He said, your company, you hire who you want. And we ended up hiring a guy he liked, Doug Hurst, who I still have a relationship with. And we took 60 days, built a book. And went to New York, and in 2 days we sat in front of $4.5 billion in capital, and we raised $17 million for the company. And that was a very interesting experience that was incredibly nerve-wracking in some ways, and then incredibly fun in others, just because we were so on a roll at that point, and I was such a cocky little fucker at that point. It was just really fun. So all those knuckleheads, right, all the bankers and all the M&A guys all drinking the same 5 square blocks in New York. And about 2 days after I got home, we got our first inquiry to buy the company. Guy calls up and he says, I'm calling from my CEO, I'm head of mergers and acquisitions. We'd be interested in purchasing the company. I was like, you know, this was unexpected. No one warned me that this was going to happen. And I took his information on the phone. I called our banker and he said, oh, I knew this was going to happen. I was like, why didn't you tell me this was going to happen? And we'll get on a quick side path here, but basically, so you got a decision to make. You're either gonna sell this company now, or you're gonna take the money, but you guys need to decide. And so we sat our partners down. How many of you guys in here are starting a company? How many of you have partners? How many of you have 50-50 partners? Please undo that immediately.
You're just kidding.
You do comedy at that age. So I had a 50-50 partner, and he and I, after 8 years, were not getting along. He used to reference himself as the founder of our company, which was utter bullshit. And I've learned to protect that status very carefully, and I'm also militant about protecting it for others. So when somebody goes out of bounds that I'm an investor with, I will smack them across the head until they finally get their shit right. Because you just look stupid. Eventually you look stupid. People know. You know, if you've got a co-founder, just admit you have a co-founder and move on. Don't begin to try to change history, because somewhere back in the background somebody knows. So anyway, sidebar. I wanted out. I wanted out of the partnership. I didn't want out of the business I was in, but I wanted out of the partnership. And so I basically forced the sale of the company, because the only way out was through an exit. If we raised more money, I was going to be stuck in this marriage for another, who the fuck knows how long, with the weight of additional capital and really, truly professional investors, which is a way different deal than dealing with a guy who said, I just want to make a dream come true, and literally never called unless I needed something. And so we created an auction. We walked away from the $17 million raise, and I went out and stirred up the pot, and we had 7 companies try to buy us simultaneously, because we were very hot. We were very hot in space, so we've already offended one. She's very And so we sold the company 60 days after we accepted the LOI for $25 million, and 39 I became a multi-millionaire. Then I got divorced, and then I became not a multi-millionaire. Get a prenup, take money out of the equation. It's just about love. I'm not kidding.
He's not kidding.
I'm not kidding.
What, you married the girl one in 2 states?
No. So we sold the company, and that was that.
Okay, so now you're on the other side.
Which sucked. I hate corporate America. I'm sorry if you're a corporate America. I just hate corporate America. I just think it's the death of so many things.
Well, that's why we don't start.
That's exactly right. So we can sell the corporate America and then move on and do another one.
Yeah, very much so.
Candy from a baby.
So now you're on the other side of the table. How people come to you, especially if it's in, we talk digital media all the time. It's going to be a big focus of the center here for as far as I can see. And digital media in Knoxville means video content production. It means a lot of different things. Digital media in Nashville tends to lean more towards music tech. Regardless, especially in the Nashville market, anyone who has a music or entertainment or media play idea, it always comes through.
Yeah, I have managed to corner that particular market.
Yeah,
and that was very intentional. So one of there's.
I tried going around it, and that's why.
He did. Yeah, it didn't.
It didn't work.
But because every other investor in town goes, oh, is Mark Montgomery in this deal?
Yes.
And so that was intentional for a couple of reasons. One is after I sold my last company, what the common wisdom would be that I would go to Valley. When you return 11x to investors, you're hot shit. So go to the bigger pond and be the small fish and then become the big fish. But I love Nashville, and I wanted to stay. I like my house. I still live in the same house I bought 22 years ago. The trappings of power are uninteresting to me unless it's a gold top Les Paul or a very fast car. But I live in a 1,700 square foot ranch. I don't give two shits about living on Bellmead Boulevard. In fact, I don't like those people. They bore me to tears. I'd rather hang around with musicians than with, oh, let's go to the club and hit some balls. Sounds really fun.
Well, I think that plays into your investment strategy, though, right? I mean, a lot of what I was talking about, a lot of people here and who come through facilities like ours are looking for early stage capital.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of, there was an article in Southern Alpha this week that said, the question was, is there a hiding somewhere, a seed fund where companies can go and get early stage capital? You actually are one of the few people who do invest from time to time in early stage startups. Why? Why?
Well, so a couple things.
Or
One,
why not, or whatever.
I think, and again, this is, my penchant for finding an 800-pound gorilla and talking about the fire now. I know it's freezing. So anyway, I think that it was a couple things. One, I think Nashville, once I made the decision to stay, right, then I decided I was going to do something about the problem. It was really that simple. And it just took a couple of us, rolling around, when we first, when our center was first conceived, there were a lot of people, there were a ton of naysayers. I could give you a list, actually. I was not one of them, and very much like in your deal, I wrote the first check. When you go into our center in Nashville, people give me shit about why is my name at the front door. Because they have the Walk of Fame and they have these little emblems on the floor. And the answer to that...
We can do that for you too here.
Yeah,
You
for
want
a small
to-
fee, you can buy we'll do a wood plaque and put it in the floor. But the answer, I didn't really even know. People lobby for that shit. I was just happy to be a part of getting it going. And I found out after the fact, after they christened the facility, that the reason my name was at the front door is because I wrote the first check. And I believe, for me, that anyone who's had any modicum of success, and I still have a long way to go as it relates to what I consider to be real success, has a responsibility to give back to the community. And if you shirk that responsibility, in my mind, you're not a good steward of what you've been given, because the community that I came up in gave me the opportunities that led to my quote-unquote monetary success. And I felt an obligation to give back. And the other thing is I never wanted anyone in my city to have the same problem I did, which was no one got what the fuck we were doing, and no one was willing to take a risk. And so, I have a very sort of specific, with my money, which drives my business manager crazy, I give away 20% of everything I earn, right out of the gate. And I have two charities of choice. I have a passion for entrepreneurs, and so part of my money goes to the Center for Entrepreneurship, and the other goes to the W.O. Smith School of Music, which transforms kids' lives fundamentally. And they don't really, music is the vehicle, but what they create is consistency, and they teach discipline. Not discipline, but discipline. And then I learned a very valuable lesson from my father, who's been, at 66, he's starting another company, and God helping him with that. But DearMonty.com, if you're interested. If you're in the market for buying or selling a house, go to DearMonty.com. It's a great little software app. He's turning it along quite nicely, actually. His MO for investing or taking wins was he would take all his money and double that. I didn't do that. I took half of my winnings and put them aside. And that's called the Don't Fucking Touch This Fund, which has continued to grow under the stewardship of my business manager. The other pile was called Bet on Yourself. And that was the pile that I invested out of. And so I own interests in about a dozen companies. None of them are healthcare. Well, I think I back one, because I'm in a fund called the Bullpen Fund, which is a seed capital fund, an actual real seed capital fund with real seed capital that does primarily early stage investing. And we created that fund really for two reasons. One, because there wasn't any real capital available for early stage. And two, we wanted to create an annuity for the center. So we take a 10% equity position in these companies we invest in exchange for the capital, and we then grant 2% of that equity in perpetuity to the center. Which is, again, another way to get back to create a viable, non-donation, non-handout kind of infrastructure around entrepreneurship in the city.
You mean you can do good and make money?
You can. Yes, unbelievably.
I want to make sure that everyone, or anyone who has questions,
Yeah,
gets
just
to
jump
chime
in.
in, so.
This is your third beer. I'm going to have to. We're gonna have to filter the question. Okay, go ahead.
Well, after my third beer,
No.
Go back out. What was the company that made you? Like what did it do? And you mentioned Napster. Were you into that gray area, copyright violation area?
I was in high school. I read software pirating ring. So yes, I would be in the black area of that. I was also there when Steve Jobs. I sat 5 rows from Steve Jobs when he launched the iTunes Music Store. And the first slide he put up was people who want to steal are going to steal, right? And the second slide was we need to provide a compelling alternative to free. And it turns out he was right. I don't even want to go down the piracy road with you. Let's just say that legislation and litigation of market share are really shitty market strategies. Ask Big Steel how that worked out for them in the 50s. And suing your customers is probably the stupidest thing you can do ever. So the decline of the music business was as much or more the music business's fault as it was the customers that they serve. So just so we're clear. And by the way, I own copyrights and masters. And right now, the problem that I have is obscurity, not piracy. I would love people to steal my music, right? Because the thing that they're giving me, well, they're giving me the most valuable asset that they have. It's the asset that we all share in common, and it doesn't matter if you got $5 in the bank or $50 million in the bank. We all have the same amount of time. And if people are willing to give me their time and I deliver them a great product, it's my experience that they will support it. Simple as that.
The court's ultimately ruled against the Napster thing, right?
That's a long story, but
Okay.
yes, the courts inevitably ruled against Napster, but at that point it was too late. It didn't matter that they won.
Toothpaste was out of the
Yeah.
on that one. Who else has a question?
What are you gonna play next?
Oh, here?
The guitar.
No, we're not. Tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. What are we playing?
Locks to lunch.
Yeah, there you go.
That's excellent.
So come see the band.
I have a question.
Yeah,
So all of us in your company, we probably all think our ideas are pretty good.
I'm sure you do.
How do we, if we're in the very beginning part of that and we're pre-revenue, how do I come to a guy like you, and obviously I'm gonna say it's gonna be here, because that's what I think. How do we find that middle ground? How do we do that? What are the best tips, I guess?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think the short answer is that there are, to me, there's a simple break point, okay? I'm what is called in the quote-unquote ecosystem a hit songwriter now, right? So I return to investors. So if I walk into a venture firm, number one, they're already lubricated, right? They already know who I am and they already want to do a deal, right? And so there's a value associated with a first-time entrepreneur, which is very low. And there is a value associated with a serial, quote-unquote, serial entrepreneur, which is very high. So that's the first delineation, is where are you on the continuum? Are you a first-timer? Or are you a second timer or a third timer? Because the third timer is really the key. You know, the sophomore jinx, if you can beat the sophomore jinx, you're pretty much guaranteed any ride you want at that point, which I've done. I have been successful in exiting enough shit that at this point no one doubts I can do it. It's just a question of what I want to do. That sounds egotistical. It's just market fact. So if you're a first timer, I'm going to put the question to Johnny. How did you convince me to write you a check? What were the simple things that you did to convince me?
I kept showing up. That was one part. I did my homework.
Ding, ding, ding. Yep.
I did my homework. I also wasn't afraid to disagree with you. I think that was a big part of it. And then I also, we've never even talked about this. Let's just let it all out. I also found other investors I knew he wasn't in business with and thought he might want to be.
What's your
they're in if you're in,
What's your company do?
kind of thing.
What were you trying to do?
My company is an artist management platform. So musicians, management, record labels can use the software to kind of manage business side of things.
What's the name of it?
Artist growth.
Artist growth.
Yep.
And I'll tell you that the reason I invested in this company was actually not the fact that it was a music-based company. I thought the abstract technology that they created had ramifications across multiple kinds of businesses, including healthcare. And while I was dissing healthcare a minute ago, there's a shitload of money to be made in healthcare. So I am a capitalist pig at the end of the day. I like to make money. Because then I can turn around and do something else with that money.
Because a big part of it was saying, hey, we're focused on music first, but painting a bigger picture. Like, look, this is bigger than just music, but we're going to start here because this is what we know. And I think we did a pretty good job of saying, hey, we're focused, but we see the big picture. But we're focused, but we see the big picture.
Well, eventually you got good at doing that. At first they came to me with this idea that was a mile wide and an inch deep. I was like, dudes, you can't boil the fucking ocean. This is never going to work, right? And so the other part of it, the key is that you're malleable, that you're mentorable without being so malleable that you're a puss, but without being such a hard ass that you absolutely can't be directed. Because what I said earlier is, once you take investors, the game changes. And at some point, those investors, if they don't like how you're behaving, will have set terms that will allow them to remove you from the equation. And I've had to remove guys. And I've also slid checks across the table. It was the best, literally the single best mistake I ever made was investing in a guy that I looked across the table at him and I knew he couldn't get the deal. But the guy sitting next to me wanted me in the deal, and so I agreed to do it. And I could have just lit that check on fire as I pushed it across the table. Because the guy just could not get the ball in the end zone. There was just no way. Ever. And he's never been able to.
So why was that the best?
That was the best example of how.
Oh, the best example.
That was the lesson. It was like,
All right, the silver lining on it.
oh my God, was like, this guy can't do it. And yet, because I had other guys around me who thought, and I just went along with it. And that was turned out to be wrong.
And we got time for more.
Do you give advice?
Isn't that what I'm doing?
You're telling me how you make money through the music business. I have a technology that I would like to see taken to fruition
Okay.
that very, very much better than anything that's being used, to the point that a lot of people just don't want it developed at this point. It's a combustion technology.
Oh, okay. Well, so first of all,
It's very clean.
I don't.
Fuel.
I only bet on shit I know.
No, I'm not asking you to bet on it. I'm asking you for advice about how to take something that a lot of people really don't want.
Let's talk offline, and I'll do what I can.
Thank you.
Happy to.
Yeah, going back to your second seed round, it sounded like you were doing really well at that point. Was it just a dollars and cents thing where you had so much overhead you needed capital to keep that going, or why did you take the second round?
Well, I didn't take a second. We only took one round.
I thought
So-
you said you got,
Well, we bank financed. The first phase we cash flow. The second phase we bank financed.
Okay.
We bank financed $1 million worth of debt
okay, maybe.
against the growth, and then we took $1 million of capital for equity,
Okay.
and then we sold the company.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard another round.
No, we had raised $17 million, but walked away from it in favor of selling the business.
Okay, I missed that, I was curious.
All right, any last minute? Anyone else got any little last minute things? We'll turn to this.
Well, if you want to,
What's your favorite guitar?
It's gonna have to be the 50, my 57 Stratocaster.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
Do you really?
Jim,
Jim?
So you were encouraging all these people to seek out smart money. First
Yeah.
of all, difficult to seek money here in general, to the extent that they could. And let's assume for the sake of argument, what makes you smart money?
Well, if you have a combustion project, I'm not smart money. So I think what makes, I'll give you just a quick, and this is just my perspective, so, and I'm going to exclude, there are exclusions to this. John Doerr, if you know your homework, if you know anything about the Valley, John Doerr is a badass investor, been a badass investor for 40 years. What I learned, I worked for a venture firm for a couple of years. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to learn how they thought. And sit in the room when the entrepreneur left and go, hear what they had to say. And what I figured out two simple truths. Well, and one of them is now a sort of a market fact. And I'm saying, we're talking about the fact that we have a lack of capital, so I
Put that aside.
the money's the easy part. If you got a great idea, you'll find the money, is my experience. The difference between dumb money and smart money is very simple. If the guy sitting across the table from you has never operated a business, has never successfully led a company through the war to an exit, and what he is basically a washed up, frustrated finance guy sitting across the table from you, he just wants to be you, but he can't be. That's stupid money, right? Because he's not additive. Smart money is all the other shit. It's market strategy, product strategy, it's sales experience.
It's relationship.
It's relationships, it's all the other stuff that is where the real value is created. And so what I tend to do is I tend to look for people who have what I want and spend time with them, as opposed to guys who like to go to the club and hit balls, right? Because those cats just want to be me, but they have no fucking idea how to do that. And so I, as the entrepreneur, have the upper hand. But the firms spend all their time convincing you that they do. And the reality is that they don't. And so, but the key to it is very simple. It's always about the person. And it's always about the idea second. And really what it is it's about that person's desire. You weren't going to be stopped. I wasn't going to be stopped. I'm not going to be stopped again. I'm in the middle of several deals, and I've got 3 or 4 investments where I've got 24-year-old kids who I've written huge checks to, who are simply not going to be stopped. And that's the bet. The bet is always on that. And the idea will always win the day, provided that it's close. And your performers are always going to be wrong. You just hope they're wrong in the right direction. But they're always wrong.
What kind of percentage are you hitting so far?
Of
How many of these
I'm
people
a
that you're...
miserable failure. Oh, you mean with my investing?
Right, with people, I recognize him, I believe him, I think he's on fire and he's gonna win. What percentage are you hitting?
Well, many of them are, the jury's still out on several of them, but I've seen, of the 12 investments I've made, 3 of them have exited so far. One for $37 million. And they paid a 22 multiple of cash. Insane. So I'm doing all right. I mean, if you're batting 500, you're killing it, because the reality is in the venture business, they're batting 100, 150. Just look at the facts. When you look at the facts of returns in the venture business, they're just abysmal. You're much better off to put your money in bonds.
Have you made more money than you've lost?
Yes.
Okay.
if you want more Mark or Mike in your diet, tomorrow we're going going to include also my good friend Mitchell Fox in the discussion around building a business in the music industry as part of the Rhythm and Blooms Festival. It's going to be at Jig and Reel in the Old City from 4:45 to 5:45. You do not have to have a festival ticket to come down. It'll be more focused on music specifically rather than just investing in. But we would love to see you there. Thank you so much for being here today. And we do this the first Friday of every month. So please come back. We have a mailing list on the desk on the way out the door. If you would please sign our mailing list, and we can tell you what we're going to be starting up next month. So thank you. Give it a mark.